Shalom and welcome to People on the Path. My name is Adam Lowy and I am the Lifelong Learning Moreh Derech at Congregation Beth Shalom in San Francisco. Each month, I will welcome dynamic guests to discuss, learn, and consider what it means to be on the path. How does an individual's choices impact their path? How do the various communities that an individual participates in change their lives forever? What unsuspecting moments became the powerful ones that inform personal and professional journeys? Where does one's relationship to their Jewish identity take surprising turns, and how does it spiritually manifest? I intend for the conversation to be intimate, unscripted, and informal. The possibilities and potential will be infinite. The directions, ways, and paths will be explored, discovered, and open. Let us please take a walk together on this month's People on the Path. And as usual, before I welcome today's guest, I would like to check in with Rabbi Ayn of our congregation. Rabbi Ayn.
Hi, Adam.
Great to see you.
Nice to see you. It's almost Passover.
I love our monthly People on the Path time together, largely because I know you get really excited by these conversations. And so before we jump in, before we bring in our guest, I want to just acknowledge we are at the precipice of Pesach and our yearly responsibility to revisit the Jewish people's flight from slavery to freedom. And so I ask you, with this just around the bend, how are you? But even more specifically, nobody expected we would be preparing for our second year of, I'm just going to call it pandemic Pesach, for lack of a better term. Yet here we are. Here we are. And I was remembering last year, I joked next year in person, right? Like that was what I said. And yet here we are. If you're lucky enough to get a little bubble, a pod, maybe you're going to actually Seder with some people in person. But like myself, I'm going to be virtually Sedering with family throughout the country. And so I wanted to ask you, how are you?
Well, that's depressing. That's sad. I think that's true. And we are still in that sort of sad state. And I think to a large extent, people are ready. A lot of people are getting vaccinated in our community. And as of this week, we moved as a city into orange, which is super exciting because that means we can have singing back, and it opens up the possibility for us to return to shul. And so the way I am now is, as everybody else is before Passover, frazzled, not super clean to the extent that this place needs to be cleaned up, wondering, do I have enough food? Is there overbuying matzah, which I don't even like, but I buy too much of it. So I'm in that normal state, but at the same time, I'm also really looking forward to, being liberated. And I think there's a real hope of that liberation coming after the Chag. So that's super exciting and adds a lot of meaning. This year we're enslaved. Right now we're enslaved. Next month or next season, or God willing, very soon, we'll be liberated and able to be together and hug each other again.
I look forward to the hugs. I look forward to maybe next year we could have a gigantic Seder, just because we couldn't. We could have a gigantic one outdoors at Beth Shalom with
That's right. That's right. Well, a Seder where we don't have enough food for people. There's not enough wine for people. There's not enough seats. No one can understand anything. All the Haggadot are mixed up. Nobody is happy. There are too many people there, and we're doing it just because we can. Amen. I love that idea. I'm all for it.
So, Rabbi Ayn, I know that you know our guest fairly well. And I know that upon your recommendation, you thought that today's guest would be a great person to have. And so we will bring you back in a little bit to ask our guest some questions. And thank you for being here. And I would love to welcome today's guest. Rabbi Rachel, can you please turn your camera on?
Hi, it's great to be here.
Hi. Thank you so much for coming. I'm gonna read your official bio that you sent, and that you that we've caught you at a particular crossroads in your professional career, and I love the timing of this as we enter Pesach. So this is Rabbi Rachel Kahn-Troster. Did I say that right? Troster.
Troster.
Troster, sorry, thank you. I just want to read to you a bit about Rabbi Rachel, and then we're going to learn a lot more about her and what she's been up to. So, it is my honor to welcome this month's guest, Rabbi Rachel. Rabbi Rachel has spent nearly 14 years at Torah, the Rabbinical Call for Human Rights, most recently as deputy director. At Torah, she was the lead strategist on Torah's human rights campaigns and heads the organizing and training of more than 2,000 rabbis and cantors. In late March, she will begin as executive vice president at the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, working with faith and values-based investors to catalyze their assets for social change. Rabbi Rachel was ordained in 2008 from the Jewish Theological Seminary, and that's how she knows Rabbi Ayn, where she was a student activist and leader. She is a noted speaker and writer on Judaism and human rights. She first came to Torah in 2007 to organize against US-sponsored torture and the war on terror. Since then, she has initiated campaigns against human trafficking and forced labor, to end solitary confinement, to fight against mass incarceration, and for human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories. Rabbi Rachel is the original #Tomato Rabbi, spearheading Torah's critical partnership with the coalition of Immokalee workers in Florida. You can correct me if I said that wrong.
Immokalee. It's Immokalee. It rhymes with broccoli.
Okay, perfect.
It's like near Naples and Fort Myers. It's not near the Jewish ancestral homeland on the east coast of Florida.
Immokalee, thank you, workers in Florida, and she leads Jewish community and worker-led campaigns for corporate accountability. Rabbi Rachel serves on the board of the Alliance for Fair Food. She is an adjunct lecturer at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And lastly, and perhaps most important, she lives in Teaneck, New Jersey with her husband, Dr. Paul Palavin.
We're very hard to pronounce in our family.
And their daughters, Leora and Eliza. Rabbi Rachel, welcome to People on the Path. That is quite a bio. And perhaps it's because you're in the midst of this transition. When this will be aired or shared publicly will be exactly in a week. And I think that is exactly when you are going to be beginning your new role. So, before we jump into how you got to this role, to this time in your professional career, how are you? You heard the question I kind of threw out to Rabbi Ayn, and I want to throw that same question out to you. How are you, and what are you thinking as we are jumping into the second year of Pesach pandemic?
This is it just feels like a moment of anticipation. I think, first of all, Pesach is a really good time to think about transition. I mean, obviously, I love the work I've been doing at Torah, so I don't feel like I'm leaving, slavery to redemption. It's not a redemption narrative, but it is a moment of change. And I think Passover makes us think about the past and then the possibilities of the future. It is very weird that it's hard that this is our second pandemic Pesach. I don't think I would have anticipated a second year of Zoom Seder. The community I live in New Jersey, on the one hand, was one of the first communities to lock down. So we've been in lockdowns since March of 2013. And for a long time, I didn't really see anyone. So I got vaccinated last week. My husband's a healthcare worker, so he actually has been vaccinated since December. I had a little bit of envy of that. He was one of the first people I know to get vaccinated. And so I feel like changes in the air, possibilities coming. I really miss seeing people. And so I feel like I want to connect with others, and hoping that the weather of Passover will mean that I'll just have a chance to be with people in a new way, that possibility feels real again. And so I'm excited and nervous. There's just so much going on. And Passover is a very hectic time. I for me, it's a little bit of a muscle memory, right? I grew up keeping kosher for Passover, so I don't really know how to do it other than the way we did it. And so I'm just like waiting for that to kick into. It's like, I'll move into Passover mode and just my body will take over and tell me what to clean and when. And hopefully I won't make too many emergency trips to the grocery store for things I've forgotten.
Yeah, yes, that's kind of you can almost touch it, right? That feeling that's right there. It feels so close right now that there is it's such an overused term at this point, but the light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Right.
And just the beauty, that it's falling right now for us as Jewish people as we prepare to jump into Pesach.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, for our viewers who don't know what Truah is, could you give us a brief breakdown on what Truah is, and maybe even how it's evolved in your 14 years? Because I'm sure you've seen an incredible change.
Sure. So Torah is an organization that mobilized rabbis and cantors primarily, and then the Jewish community who supports us to be voices for change. We are the moral voice of the Jewish community. We believe that rabbis and cantors and the Jewish community had an obligation to speak out about difficult social justice issues. That part of the essence of being Jewish is really to honor the fact that every human being is created in the image of God. That's a really difficult thing to actually live out. I think as Americans, we tend to think that human rights are something you aspire to, right? If you do all the right things, you get human rights, but actually human rights are the floor for human interaction. Everybody deserves human rights. People who do good things, people who do bad things, and to fight for a world where everybody's human rights are actualized through a Jewish lens, to be part of a Jewish voice calling for change. Trust, as you said, has changed a lot since I started there. We're a bigger organization. We've taken on a lot more issues. I think more of the Jewish community sees social justice and the call for human rights as a core part of their Jewish identity. And I've had the chance to meet also a lot of Jews who want to know that the Jewish community is present in the movements they care about. So they care about issues like Black Lives Matter because it's just part of who they are as good human beings. But it also matters to them that the Jewish community is showing up. Whether I think we've really been a sort of light to Jews who may feel like a little bit less affiliated because the Jewish community is not speaking to the issues they care about. And we are telling rabbis and cantors that part of their job is to speak out. Obviously, the biggest change for us was the election of Donald Trump, where we moved into kind of a mode of resistance, just that the Jewish community had the obligation to speak out against the injustices of the past 4 years. Our motto became resisting tyrants since Pharaoh, to say that the Jewish community had always spoken up against those who really created existential crisis for who we are.
The modern Amalek.
Yeah, so we're a much bigger organization. When I started, we were 3.5 staff. I'm leaving the organization under the leadership of Rabbi Joel Jacobs with, I think we're 16 or 17 staff. So I think that also really speaks to the fact that the Jewish community continues to be really engaged in these issues and wanting to know that the clergy are speaking out on the issues that matter.
Is it safe to assume that your next step professionally with the Interfaith Center on corporate responsibility is even larger than the work that you were doing in Truah? I mean, only in the sense that because it's interfaith, it's not specifically a Jewish component to it. I mean, there's Jewish component, but when I hear interfaith, I assume that this is addressing kind of the justice work that both faiths or many faiths should be considering.
I'm really excited, and ICCR is an organization I've worked alongside for probably 10 to 15 years. And you're right, it's a chance to work with a faith community beyond just the Jewish community. ICCR was founded in 1971 to fight apartheid in South Africa, and they started off as the pension funds of the Reform movement, and also all the major Christian denominations and priests and nuns and monks who wanted to not just fight politically against apartheid, but also wanted to use their assets to pressure the corporations to divest from supporting South Africa, supporting apartheid in South Africa. So this is a real chance to be part of a different kind of community of faith and values-based investors, people who are using seeing a different form of power, and seeing a real part of their legacy being in community with people of different faiths. I was just in touch with a reverend friend of mine who was a mentor. He was the founding executive director of the National Religious Campaign Against Torture, and he retired a number of years ago. But he was at the National Council of Churches when ICCR was founded, which I had forgotten. And he said to me that he thinks that ICCR is the strongest interfaith organization that he knows of. So, we're really stepping into a real legacy. The team there is amazing. So it's exciting for me also because, when I started at Trua, it was very, there were starting to be a number of us as rabbis who were working for justice organizations. And it wasn't really clear to me, what would come next. But after being at Trua for 14 years and getting a chance to dive into the human rights work I care about, the fact that this is my next step is really exciting.
That's amazing. And I'm sure you're entirely dialed into this, but I feel like in general, our country has heightened senses to all this type of conversation in a way that probably was not the case 5 years ago. Certainly wasn't the case 15 years ago when Trua was getting started. And so yeah, this is quite a time to take on this role, and it's really exciting. And so People on the Path is certainly a space for us to recognize the work and talk about the work that you're doing today. It's also a space for us to dig in a little bit about how you got to this time in this moment, personally and professionally. And I wanted to ask you first, what was it like growing up for you? What were you surrounded by that perhaps led you to do this work as an adult? What was your family like? How observant were you? Can you give us a little bit of paint a little picture for us about what was life like for Rabbi Rachel before she was a rabbi?
So it's funny because when I tell you the story, you're going to say, of course, you ended up doing this work. But I have to tell you that until the moment so I'm going to tell you the story, but until the moment I ended up at Trua, I don't think I knew that I was going to end up doing this work professionally. I am a rabbi's kid. My dad was also ordained from the Jewish Theological Seminary in 1982. And while I was there, my parents, my mom's not a rabbi, she's a writer, led a student group called the Group for the Rabbinic Ordination of Women, which was fighting for JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary, to ordain women as rabbis, which we weren't doing yet. And they held a protest outside the seminary, and they organized students to pressure the faculty. And I'm a twin. They took pictures of my twin sister and I, in t-shirts that said JTS class of 2001, which is when I would have gone had I not taken time off, with a question mark. And they sent it to the entire faculty of the Jewish Theological Seminary. And the chancellor at the time had actually changed his position. He was now in favor of ordaining women as rabbis. But hadn't said so publicly. And he actually wrote a recommendation letter for my 10-month-old sister and I, for JTS, which I then forgot to use when I was admitted to rabbinical school. And then I grew up in Canada, and I would say that was formative for a number of reasons. One, I grew up in a very liberal country. Two, although the conservative movement where I grew up in Canada was historically much more right-wing than that in the United States. So when I was growing up, most American synagogues were starting to allow women to fully participate in Jewish ritual life. Canadian conservative synagogues were not, except for my dad's synagogue. So I already kind of had this Judaism where even though we were pretty observant at home, we celebrated Shabbat together. My sister and I spent all this time running around my dad's synagogue growing up. We were still kind of outsiders within our Judaism because we had a feminist Judaism that other people around us didn't share. And so learned from the moment I was pretty young to speak up for what I cared about. I remember when I was in second grade, our teacher told us that bar mitzvahs were a real thing, but bat mitzvahs were just an excuse for a party. And I was really angry and came up with reasons why not. So there always was this activist stream as part of the Jewish life that I had. And also my late father became a Jewish environmentalist. So for him, I would say that was theology. Like he was a theologian. He thought deeply about those things. I became more of an activist, right? I liked it. He would always ask me, like, what's the theology of the work that you do? I was like, we just have to do the work. We don't need a theology of the work. But I think knowing that it was important for rabbis to be moral voices was part of how I grew up. And I always wanted to be a rabbi. My sister did not. I don't think I really thought about it that much. Like I knew I could always do something else, but I was relatively young when I went to rabbinical school and just, I think, wanted to keep doing the Judaism I grew up with. Yeah, because sometimes you're just on the path that you think you're on. And what was really great for me was the morning after I was ordained as a rabbi, I realized like, oh, I was 28 and I was like, I have 40 years to figure things out for myself. And so I think it's only after I've become a rabbi that I've really had the chance to kind of experiment with the Judaism that I want, try new things, think about what things really mean for me, while just trying to provide a home for my children that like gives them a connection to Judaism, but makes them understand that it's a little bit more flexible and that I also want them to ask more questions.
So clearly your father kind of planted the seed of justice, activism, speaking up. I mean, he was for something before his movement was for it, let's say, and not only for it, but spoke out about it. What part did your mother play in you, do you think, in kind of arriving to kind of this lifelong work for yourself?
I think she was the reason we were feminists, and I know like really tried also in her own way to go against the grain in Toronto of trying to found like a Jewish feminist center and making sure that we understood um, that part of Judaism, because even though the Judaism we were growing with was egalitarian, it wasn't necessarily feminist in the same way. Like the service was pretty traditional. And I think also just being an important corrective sometimes to know-it-all me, when I was, like reminding us about like how to connect to the women of our past. Like at one point when I complained, it's like, oh, well, I just don't want to deal with all the cooking for Passover. Why can't we just focus on the Seder? She's like, because generations of women in your family, that's what they took care of, which is funny because now I'm the cook in our family. My husband, bless him, does laundry. So division of labor is really important. But most Seders, I both run the Seder and cook for Seder. So I kind of get both pieces. My mother's also a journalist. And so she taught me to ask good questions of people and just be interested in people, which I think, I don't know, they say that to be a really good organizer for justice, you also have to love people and be interested in people and want to learn from them. So I think that ability to ask people questions and get to know their stories comes from her too.
I love that. The influence of both your parents. I can hear and just sense that you carry them with you daily in the work, and I wanted to just ask what was the ordination day like when that happened, like were both your parents there? Did your dad say anything about that photo from you in your T-shirt with your sister? I mean, like that's a major moment.
It was a major moment. It was really happy for me. What we did so my older daughter, who's now 13, was, I guess, just shy of 6 months old when I was ordained. So we put her in the T-shirt, which we still have. I thought like having her wear my T-shirt was cute. If we'd made her own T-shirt that said like JTS, I don't know, class of 2033 or whatever, but that's kind of sick. Like you don't need to do that. Both me and Paul went into our dad's careers. So we've told the children they don't have to be doctors or rabbis. They could be circus clowns. It was such a happy day because I think it was really a celebration of the path that I had been on. And even though I have said that I didn't really know what else I would do, I did feel like I had chosen it freely. Like my mom at one point said to me, when I was an undergrad, right before I applied to rabbinical school, she said, you don't have to do this because you always said you would. And having her say that to me at that moment was really freeing because I think I knew intellectually that I wouldn't disappoint people, but actually hearing that emotionally, that it was okay, that I didn't have to feel like I had to fill what was written on a t-shirt in 1980, was important. So that felt like a really important moment. And I think, my father passed away a couple of years ago, but I think one thing he and I managed to do really well was really carve out our own rabbinates where we didn't have to be each other. I didn't have to be him. There was a moment I think I'd been ordained for a few years when, because I just worked with so many rabbis and cantors through Truah, when people stopped asking me, was I his kid? And people started asking him, was he my father? And that was really, I think, a really great moment. But it's funny, I was going through old email from when I started at Truah in 2007, and one of the first emails was a friend of mine, someone who's now a friend and colleague, saying, "Can I ask, are you Larry Troster's kid?" So that was nice. I think I'm going to send it to this friend of mine and say, "Guess what?"
That's that's great. I wish I could see that moment, that day, and also like how wonderful for your mother to say that to you, right? To give you that freedom, really, to give you maybe whether you were thinking it or not, right? She gave you that space to make it you, to make it your own, which is inevitably what this is about, right? This is all about your path and your impact and your decisions. And I just love how they created the space for you to be that person, and that you've arrived to where you are in your work, and also in your personal life. And so I wanted to ask you about the hashtag tomato rabbi, right? Like, it's like, I mean, to claim, like, so you in your bio, you claim that you were the original, right? So of course I had to search up what did that mean, because I'm sorry, I didn't know what it was. And clearly, you're not the only one. When I searched, this is a lot of them at this point. So what is a hashtag tomato rabbi, and does it have a connection to the over 2,000 rabbis and cantors that you've trained?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned earlier, Truah is the major Jewish ally of the Coalition of Immokalee Workers in Florida, or CIW. And we've started working with them 10 years ago. Out of our work on human trafficking, we have been working on human trafficking since 2008. And it was a very kind of like, not dry, but it was very just an educational campaign. And we really wanted to connect it to the lives of real people. And Rabbi Jill Jacobs, who's Truah's executive director, was just starting, and she had written an article about the coalition, and we just encountered them. We had met them at a conference, and she said, well, they're really making change in the Florida tomato industry. The Florida tomato industry, which you guys don't have this in California, but if you're east of the Mississippi, most of the tomatoes you eat in winter come from Florida, simply because Florida is hot in the winter. There's no soil in Florida. They have to like truck in soil and cover it with tarps and plant tomatoes in it. You guys have California tomatoes. So CIW was making change in the Florida tomato industry by basically holding the corporations at the top of the supply chain, responsible for human rights abuses and poverty at the bottom. And Florida had been called like ground zero for modern day slavery. Jill had just written an article about their campaign, which at the time was against Trader Joe's. And they really wanted to get the Jewish community involved because they'd had a lot of faith leaders involved, but just they hadn't had like an organized Jewish group. And Jill said, well, what would happen if we, took rabbis to Florida to actually see CIW and learn from them? And so we took our first delegation of tomato rabbis in the fall of 2011. We'd never been to Immokalee before. It's a town about 30 miles outside of Naples and Fort Myers. And we told these rabbis, like, I know it's crazy to travel right before the high holidays. We promise you'll get a great sermon out of it. And we did. We got to visit with the CIW. We got to learn from them about how they were making change in the fields. We got to really actually understand what it meant to be led, not just learn about human rights abuses from people affected, but to be led by them in solutions, which is really inspiring. We got to visit the farm of the first grower who signed an agreement with them to make changes in his farm, who was a Jewish man named John S. Forms. And looking back, also, we got to see that the Florida tomato industry change in real time. So we then brought 11 delegations of tomato rabbis, more than 100 rabbis and cantors between 2011 and 2018, which was our last group before the pandemic. And they would like learn about CIW, but CIW's campaign to get corporations to sign on as national. So they go home and they organize in their communities, and their Hebrew school students would send letters. And it was really a chance to see change happening for tens of thousands of farm workers. What we didn't know was, like, when we first went on that first trip, where we really like didn't know what we would find and the relationships we would build and the way it would change who we were as an organization, was that right as we got there, after years of like fighting against the growers, this first grower and then the whole Florida tomato industry had agreed to changes on their farms. So we got to see conditions for workers change in real time. The way that like simple things a lot of us take for granted, like the right to get paid while we're at work, right? So the tomato workers used to leave really early in the morning for the fields, but they wouldn't start getting paid till they started picking, because you can't pick tomatoes until the dew dries. So none of us would want to sit at our workplace not getting paid for hours. So under the Fair Food Program, for example, they put time clocks into the fields. And so now parents could like leave later for the fields, and they wouldn't have to leave their kids at like 3 a.m. with daycare before they went to work. They had the right to like, water and shade in the fields. So actually to see that change for over the past decade has been really transformative. I think, a lot of the work I did on labor trafficking was focused on buying a better product, right? Like that, like, okay, there used to be this like website called Slavery Footprint, and you would find out how many slaves worked for you, and then you would think about how to buy a better product. And although I think that's important, like making ethical consumption choices is important. None of us want to know like that we're benefiting from human misery. We also have to be activists. And I think for like me as a rabbi, it was really simple, right? Like it's the tomato worker who's created in the image of God and not the tomato, right? So my solution had to be about supporting the rights of the tomato worker and not just buying something that made me feel better. And so to be able to be part of that kind of campaign and to really, I just learned so much from CIW and from taking the tomato rabbi delegations. Plus, of course, getting to go to Florida in the winter never made me, a sad person. I would get off the plane in Fort Myers in February, and I think I could be working on the rights of Alaskan pipeline workers, but instead I'm in Florida right now, which is very nice. You're in the Bay Area, you don't have to deal with winter the way we do.
No, I'm from Detroit, so I know exactly what you speak of. And I spent many winter in Florida with my grandparents, so
Yep.
I do know that feeling of when you arrive to the warmth of Florida from the Midwest and or Canada. So can you describe like what was the leadership at CIW like? Like who was taking on that work, and how did you kind of bring a Jewish lens to that process?
Great. So CIW is made up of farm workers who largely who came to the United States in the 1990s from Haiti, Guatemala, and Mexico. There are other populations as well, but that's CIW's primary population. And a number of them had been organizers in their home countries, and they bought a lot of their theories of organizing and of popular education to the Florida tomato fields. And so they began organizing themselves. I think one thing that's kind of amazing about CIW is they don't have one leader, right? There's no Cesar Chavez down there. The CIW's leadership is diverse. It represents everybody. All the leadership are people who have been farm workers. There used to be a rule that actually you had to spend one season a year picking, so that you would never lose the connection to the fields. But now the work is year round because the Fair Food Program has expanded up the East Coast. So there isn't quite time for that. But I think it was really a way, in some worker organizations, like in some unions, there's a real disconnect between the leadership and the members. And it was really a way to continue to ground the leadership and the members. And they had really understood early in their organizing that they had 3 really key allies in this work. Students on university campuses. So like, for example, in their first campaign on Taco Bell, there was a campaign to kick Taco Bells off campuses. I think they had like 15 it was before my time, so I don't remember the exact numbers. Consumers of conscience, and then people of faith. And for a long time, that was churches. I remember I was on a farm, and it wasn't just like advocacy, it was also real support. I remember I did part of a farm worker march in Florida. They were doing a 2-week march from from Naples to Lakeland, Florida, which is the headquarters of the Publix supermarkets. And I went for like 2 days of the march. And one of the things that impressed me, in addition to just all of the people from all around the country who flew in, was the way that every night the local churches would like bring food to feed CIW and host people, and which we got a chance to do as a Jewish community. I was part of a fast outside of the major shareholder of Wendy's, which is our current target. We did a fast outside his New York City office for a week in March of 2018.
Wow.
And at one point there was gonna be a big march at the end, and there were people coming all over the country. And I got this call, I was like, help, we need somewhere to feed 70 people from Texas. Is there a synagogue that that will host them? We promise it'll be vegetarian food. And I called another rabbi who had been a tomato rabbi with me, and I knew her synagogue might be able to do it. And lo and behold, they hosted all these allies and farm workers for lunch. So I think they were able, so anyways, to go back to your question, when we got involved in 2011, there had been very, very strong support from the faith community. And for whatever reason, there had never been a national Jewish organization that had been part of the campaign. So they saw real opportunity when they met us. So where, I said that we wanted to connect our work to the lives of real people. They saw an opportunity to bring in another faith group as supporters. And so it was I think it was a match of two organizations who were looking to build on each other's work.
Beautiful. I know I'm looking at the clock, and I know this is the time that Rabbi Ayn is itching for me to let him join us. And so Rabbi Ayn, thank you for joining us. Thank you for bringing Rabbi Rachel to us and our community. And I want to hand it off to you with any follow-up questions. Anything?
Yeah, really, thank you, Rachel and Adam. Really awesome conversation, especially heading into Passover, or when you're watching this in the midst of Passover. So speaking of Passover, so just so you know, Rachel, all of your time clock for cleaning and preparing for Pesach, you can't do that stuff in the Bay Area because the supermarket doesn't have anything you need. So I just want to heads up, it does change substantially from this coast to that coast, which brings me to first things first, which is the only place you can really get kosher meat in San Francisco is Trader Joe's. So is that a problem?
No, actually it was, so they joined the Fair Food Program in 2012. I'll tell you a great story. So when we first went to Immokalee, Trader Joe's was the target. And we were like, great, that's the Jewish store. Our people shop there. It's in a lot of the country, it's the only place you could get kosher meat. We're on it. So we had a rabbinic letter. I think we had 125 rabbis sign a letter urging them to join the Fair Food Program, which then was hung up on a blown up version of it was hung up on the headquarters of Trader Joe's at a big rally in the fall of 2011. And then the security guard tore it down, leading to the headline, "You don't want to see, Trader Joe's shuts doors to rabbis and ministers." And then I took the second tomato rabbi delegation to Immokalee, and it was that week, the first Trader Joe's was going to open in Florida. This is 2012, on Immokalee Road. So we took the delegation, we hung we put the CIW's thing was a penny more per pound of tomatoes. So we made a mezuzah out of with the penny per pound. We put it up on the store. We said, which wasn't open yet, we said, "May this store open for justice." And we sounded the shofar. And then I get home to New Jersey, and the next day my phone starts blowing up. And I finally look at it, it says, "We won." I was like, "We won what?" And it turned out Trader Joe's had joined the Fair Food Program. And that was so exciting, first of all, to know that we had part of change. It was, the campaign had been going on for a while, but to be part of a victory. I also say, as a human rights activist, you don't always get to be part of change. And when you are part of change, that feeling of that you've made a difference, you live on that for a long time. And so we were really grateful to have been able to be part of that moment. Trader Joe's, there's 14 corporations that are part of the Fair Food Program, and Trader Joe's is one of them. So
okay, well, that's good. We didn't have another option, if that's the case. He's very slim here in San Francisco. Okay, I know Adam's got more questions. I know I normally take up 2 times. I only have 2 more questions, and they're really one question. And Rachel, I'm going to ask you a hard question. Okay, so my first question, and these are connected. My first question is, how does who is in the Oval Office impact your work And, not only how you think about your work, but also people's response and donations to your work. And then the second question is your father's question, which is, what is the theology to the work that you're doing? And I think that those are connected, because I think that the previous administration, I mean, when we were in school, Bush was the president, and I remember a lot of work that you were doing under that administration. These administrations change, and I think I'm looking for the theological sort of thing that holds it all together.
That's a great question. So I would say the one thing that Torah had it as somewhat as an advantage, which was a disadvantage when President Trump was elected, is that we didn't have a DC policy arm. So I think there were a lot of Jewish justice organizations who relied on they had a lot of building power through access to the executive branch. So we didn't have that, so we didn't lose. Now, I won't lie, we had we hadn't prepared for Trump to be elected. Nobody had. I went around at one point and I asked other colleagues, and no one had a statement prepared, no one had a plan. And it did radically shift our work. I think the difference now is, having worked under President Bush and then President Obama and President Trump and now President Biden, I think we're not demobilizing. We still don't have a DC office, but we're still kind of committed to holding President Biden accountable, to not giving up. I mean, I think we have to understand that things are changing.
Your donations go down is my question.
I don't think so, because I think people want to, still want to hear that moral voice, and their understanding of how change in this world happens, and the need for communities of faith. I think it's interesting that, as I'm sure you know very well, the largest group of young people's religion is spiritual, non-religious. But I found that those people want to see rabbi, even if it's not their faith anymore. It's important to them that they see that the faith voice out there is not just a right-wing faith voice. In terms of my theology, all right, I'm going to tell you what I've been saying, but I think right now it's getting a little bit more complicated for me. For a long time, I said that I could say three things with a straight face. I didn't know if there was a God. Every human being was created in the image of God, and the work of human rights was kadosh, was sacred work. And I felt like that was really authentic to who I was as a rabbi and activist. And I felt like I could say that because I think, as someone who went to rabbinical school relatively young, I spent a number of my first years at Torah feeling like I had learned that I was actually meant to be a human rights activist, and I was just pretending to be a rabbi. And I think over the past few years, learning to move back into my rabbinic voice, and think about what that means for me, is just a path I've realized recently I'm back on. So, I would say the idea that one should do justice and walk humbly before God feels really important in this moment, especially because we came out of a moment of political hubris, right? That's what's been on my mind, to do justice and walk humbly before God.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because Rachel and I had the same theology teacher, Rabbi Neil Gilman, of blessed memory, and so I'm curious how he might respond to your three statements, and how he might push you. And it's great that go talk.
Yeah, I think he would be happy I was thinking about God.
Amen.
I think we often throw around B'Tselem Elohim, but we don't actually, to be created in the image of God. But when you take that seriously, that's really complicated. You have to think about God's image and all its imperfections, and you have to be willing to fight for people who do bad things, and understand that being created in the image of God is not something people get if they do everything right. And that's really challenging, and something I wrestle with, because I think it means that sometimes you have to say, saying even bad people have rights is not a popular thing to say, but they're also created in the image of God. And then what does that say about God? That's the question I haven't wrestled with as much.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you for addressing it, and thank you for making me feel like we were back in Rabbi Gilman's office there for a second.
Absolutely. You need a pipe now, though.
What was that?
You need a pipe now, though.
I know, right? I'll have to work on that next. He gave me one of his old pipes.
Wow.
In fact, at his funeral, He gave me one of his pipes, and he gave me a whole bag of tobacco, which I still have the entire bag of tobacco. And I went and I lit it up outside of Anshe Chesed and people were crying. People were crying because that smell was so distinctive to who he was. Anyway, it's great to see you, Rachel. Chag Sameach. And I'll let Adam finish the program.
Thank you, Rabbi Ayn. Rabbi Rachel, amazing stories, and I'm so tempted to ask, what was your memory of meeting Rabbi Ayn the first time before he was a rabbi? When most rabbis have a presence. Rabbi Ayn has a particular presence, and so I'm gonna ask you. I guess I have to ask you. So, do you remember the first time you met him?
I don't, but the signature story I have from Rabbi Ayn from Rabbinical School, and this is going to date us slightly, is when he gave his senior sermon and his notes were on an iPhone, and which was relatively new at the time. And he talked about what did it mean to be teaching Torah, an ancient tradition, when all have received wisdom, and the newest thing was that iPhone. It was just so audacious to do it, but yet was also a really deep dive into what does it mean to represent tradition and faith. So that's my Rabbi Dan Ayn story from Rabbinical.
And ironically, we are still grappling with that, right? Particularly during pandemic, is this spirituality, religion through a screen, through devices. Yeah. And yes, I would let you know that he's still wrestling with this one. So Rabbi Ayn, I thank you in the background for allowing me to ask her that question. So we're getting near our end of our time, and I'm so grateful for everything you shared, and how quickly our conversation became about really the Jewish values that have informed you from the very beginning. And I wanted to ask you this question: if you had one sentence to say, and I wrote it down as every Jewish person, but I'm going to not say it's every Jewish person because of the work you're doing, specifically moving into your new role at the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility. So I would say, if you have one sentence to say to any person about their responsibility to be tzaddikim, to be what I'm going to just translate as righteous justice seekers, what would you say to that person? One sentence.
It's a journey, and we're all on it together. Find people to be on the journey towards justice with, and find joy in the work that we do, because it's hard work. But if you can do it together and you can find those moments of joy, you will be sustained in making the world a better place through the long haul.
Amen. Beautiful. And yes, may we all get the chance to be together in the work and whatever efforts that you're making towards justice, towards equality, towards making sure that you don't only see people in B'Tselem Elohim, but that we all see each other that way. Yes, and the joy that will bring. And I'm looking forward to those times when we can actually do that with people. And you could actually march again comfortably, even though there's been some great marching over the last year. I'm just really grateful to have you, and I'm going to put you through the speed round of questions. This is ideally not something you spend a great deal thinking about your answers, and these are questions that I ask each of our people on the path guests. So the first one, what are 5 necessities that you must have with you on the path?
Caffeine, chocolate chip cookies. Yes. Something that keeps you sane. I run. People you love. And someone who can challenge you.
Beautiful. I'm a big fan of many of those things. Those would be mostly of mine as well. The next one. What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, it's a tie. Pesach is one of my favorite Jewish holidays, but I also like Sukkot a lot. I like the combination of having people over in normal times and doing something at home, but it just being like more. So I love putting up a sukkah. I will be, I am sure, losing my mind on Friday as I get ready for Seder, but I never, because I run Seder and I cook, I like never have time to really prepare a super creative Seder. So I'm doing it on the fly. And I love it. I just think it's a great story. I learned something new from Seder every single year. It changes because of who's there. Yeah, Passover and then also Sukkot.
Excellent, thank you. And if you could walk the path with anybody, past, present, even a future version of somebody, who would you like to walk the path with?
I think I would want to be a fly in the room in the civil rights movement. Not because there's one person, but I think I would want to see how how the change happened. I think the civil rights movement, there were amazing people, but it was also a story of a movement. And I would love to see that what it meant to be in the room with all those great leaders as they figured out how to work together and make change.
Thank you. And my last question, this doesn't have to be a speedy response because this is a doozy. What do you see ahead on your path?
That's a really good question. I think for me, I am looking forward to this moment of reflecting. I'm obviously very excited about my new role. It's an organization I care about. I'm really excited to dive into the work. And I have been at Truah for a third of my life.
Wow.
So it's been very hard for me to separate what it means to be, in some ways, an adult, what it means to be a Jew, and what it means to be a rabbi from the amazing work we've done at Truah. And so I think I'm looking forward to, so by the time this airs, it will have happened. I'm looking forward to waking up, maybe it's next Friday, on Friday morning or next week, and have a chance to be like, okay, this is the next stage. So it's not clear to me what comes next, because I think I want a chance to just be able to look back and say, where did I go? And then I'll sort of know where I'm going. And I think this is a really good time to do that. I think one of the things I've been blessed with in the movement for justice is I've gotten to know really great people who then have become friends. And I think what I love about them, especially a lot of the women, is how many chapters their lives have. That if you haven't done everything by the time you name whatever age obsessed age you are, that you have a chance to do something else. I mean, and that there will not something else, something different, that the work will grow. So I'm now closing a chapter and I'm starting a new one. And all I can say for sure is that there will be more chapters.
What a beautiful answer and way to bring our program to a close this time, because that is exactly what I'm trying to express to our community and to community around the world. And Rabbi Ayn is trying to bring that same notion that there's no definitive end and there's no definitive right or wrong way to go about your searching, your identity building, and the work you do as a person and as an occupation to make the world the place you want it to be, and also to inspire people's faith to guide them through some really big and important decisions. And so, Rabbi Rachel, I must say that the ICCR is blessed to be having you join them officially as an employee, even though I know you've been doing tons of work with them throughout. And I feel extremely grateful to you that you came on People on the Path, that you shared your story, and that you were able to paint a little bit of the picture of the work that you've been doing and the work that you will continue to do. And I hope that us as a congregation can stay connected to you in some of this work. And even though, yes, tomatoes grow everywhere around us, more than you need, that there's definitely endless important environmental justice work, social justice work, and I will look towards you as a beacon to guide us in what's most important and how to do it successfully with intention and purpose. So I wish you a great Pesach. I wish you a great transition as you part the seas and arrive to your new land. And I hope that however you're feeling Friday late, that it's a feeling that you are on top of, and it's a feeling that that propels you to continue to lead your community.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure to be here. Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. And I'm just going to finish, everybody. Moving on. People on the Path will be shared on the last Wednesday of each month. Please keep your eyes and ears open for the next edition, which will be available on Wednesday, April 28th. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope this conversation has been valuable and will support your efforts to find your footing and balance as you continue to navigate and blaze your path. One step at a time, I encourage you to walk your path with courage, wonder, curiosity, an open mind, body, and spirit. And I say shalom and nisya tova, safe travels on your path. Thank you, everybody.